You can access the entire episode now on our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, Rokfin, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Now let's get into some high strangeness. You have been doing some research into the deep underground military bases in Colorado. Now, of course, most people that listen to this program have, of course, are probably somewhat familiar with the Denver airport and what could possibly be underground there. There's plenty of conspiracies, and of course you see all the posters that are in places of the airport of highly suspicious and conspiratorial type of paintings and things like that. So it is a very interesting place, but let's start with some of the stuff that you've come up with.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll kind of start the story on how I kind of got it up to that. I live in Denver area, and so obviously that's what's going on here. But back in the 90s, I don't know if people remember back then, maybe not even alive back then, but some of the listeners, but they used to have a thing called public access, because when they put cable in, for cable to come in, they had this thing called public access. So there used to be a place down at Five Points where we could come and people could do their own like little television shows, and they were on like one of the cable channels. And I got recruited to be a cameraman it was called a Men in Black show. And it was kind of like a parody of the Men in Black. Agent G, Gallegos, and Agent N Nelson, they dressed up in like Men in Black costumes. And then they interview people. It was basically a TV interview show, basically, with a little twist. So they'd have their we had lots of great guests. Well, one time I was there doing the camera, and they had a guy came in. I can't remember I actually have I'm not going to mention his name, actually. I do have the video. I found it. I went digging through stuff. Oh, here it is. But anyway, he was going to write a book, Underground Denver. He never seems to have published it. I haven't found it. But what he writes like historical fiction novels, but they're real history. He puts a little bit extra, so he has to get real documentation, the references in the back of his book, right, to document everything he did in his kind of docudrama book. And there's like one reference that the state of Colorado was not giving him that he needed to publish his book, right? You got this book, you worked a year on it, you got to get, whatever. So he finally just got tired of waiting for them. So he grabs the paperwork and he says, "Where is the state of Colorado and city of records?" And he finds the location downtown. So he goes there and he gets in this garage. He goes on the underground garage, right? He parks his car, and then he walks around till finally at the bottom of the underground garage he finds this little door, with like a little office with somebody there. And he goes in and he gives the lady there. The guard, there's actually a little security guard there. He gives him like a paper, says, "Hey, I need to get this reference from the the archives, state of Colorado archives, blah blah blah." And so the guard lets him down. So then he goes down 5 stories. He's going down. So now he's like 9. Walks, opens the door. He's 9 stories underground. That's where he's at right now. He walks into this government office, and it's like a DMV office, right? It's like a small DMV office. There's a counter there with a lady. There's this guy sitting there talking to her. And there's, some wooden benches. He sits on the wooden benches. And then he turns over to the side. He looks out. There's a big window, right, with a door next to it. And there's a pickup truck parked out there. Why, he's 9 stories under there. What's the hell? So he's sitting there, and every now and then, there's like a tunnel you can see back there that's lighted. And every now and then, like a vehicle come by with lights on. And he's there for like 15 minutes. This guy was talking to the chick. I think he was probably flirting with her, because when you're for undergrad, you've got nothing better to do. So finally he gets done with doing whatever that is, and the guy walks out the door, gets in his pickup truck, and drives away, right? And so the guy says, "Well, that's pretty weird, but, crazy things happen." So he gets up and he hands the lady his request for, that particular reference material. And the lady looks at it and says, "You're not supposed to be down here." So she has to call the guard. The guard has to walk down all 5 stories and then escort him back up. And of course, that naturally sparked his interest. What is this crazy underground stuff? And so, well, first off, that road, he kind of researched the road. He kind of knows people, right? He knows how to, he knows things. So he found out that road goes all the way out to DIA. It's like a 2-lane road. Not only does it go out to DIA, it goes out to, there's a turn somewhere, and it goes down to Colorado Springs, where all the military bases are, so it goes down there. And it also goes out into Lakewood. We'll go talk about the underground base under Lakewood Federal Center. and then it goes into Boulder. Supposedly in Boulder, you can get to it from the bottom of the physics department building. And I know some physicists because I'm kind of in that zone. But I could never find the entrance at the bottom of the physics building. There's a lot of locked doors though, so I'm not saying it's there. And then it dead ends. It supposedly dead ends outside of Boulder. There's an IBM plant outside of Boulder, but actually under the IBM plant, one of the main reasons he had plants there's actually this an FAA base. I guess that's Federal Aviation Administration base. There's actually 9 secret bases all across the country, and any one of them could run all the air traffic in the United States if there was like an emergency. And so that was one of those out there underneath the IBM building.
What do you think about the rumors that those tunnels actually go all the way to like Dulce, New Mexico?
Oh no, that's the railroad tunnels.
Okay,
which I can talk about. Those are the railroad tunnels. I can do the whole story on that. I'm just talking these guys.
Yeah.
And then there is a railroad tunnel actually pretty much comes almost underneath my house where I live out in Morrison. And because they run it through the granite out there. And yeah, it hooks up with the it's about 1,000 feet big. In fact, I might as well talk about that. Years and years ago, my dad was the chief scientist for the MX missile project. And then later he worked for Tetra Tech, which was doing all the environmental studies for the MX missile project. You know, when it got to another level of completion, once they built the suckers, they shut down the project. They're just building them now. And so I got a summer job there as the librarian, assistant librarian, because Bob Caracabero, he was such a pain to work with. You know, they couldn't get anybody, but I got along great with him. You know, it was only put like he was doing whatever he did, like 4 hours, right? And then I was done, and I had the keys to the entire archive, and there was a lot of interesting. Well, maybe is it classified information? Maybe it was classified information. And so when I had nothing better to do, you know, I spent some of my time reading. You know, after all, and one of the things is it was called the atomic. It was called the U.S. Shale Oil Project. This was in the late 1970s. I said, what the blank is the U.S. Shale Oil Project going there? So I pick it out and I open up the file, and the first thing I see is this picture, and it's actually on the net. You'll picture of like one of those giant boring machines with a bunch of Air Force officers. There's like 50, 60 Air Force officers, all the brass boys standing in front of this giant boring machine. And the boring machine has a big U.S. Air Force on it. And I said, what is it with this giant oil shale project? Well, when you go back to that guy that wrote the Underground Denver book, he went out and did a bunch of research. And I guess this is correlating research with him. But they created this project. You know how they always, you know, you got a $500 toilet or $20,000 wrench. That toilet's not worth $500. The wrench is not worth $20,000. They're using that to cover up black budget money, right?
Yeah.
So the black budget money is actually distributed in a real program, but the money actually goes to a black budget. Well, that's what this oil shale project was. It only made it cost $4.7 billion, and it only made quote 300,000 barrels of oil from oil shale.
Oh shit!
Right. Back then, oil was like $10 a barrel, right? Okay, yeah. Right. Sure, it was. Yeah, and that was right in front of the picture. Obviously, that's what it was. So they spent that for building those underground tunnels. What the tunnels are, they built them all the way across the country. They go from D.C. and other places on the East Coast to Vandenberg on the West Coast. They even say some go out to the out in the Pacific, and they have like one of those secret James Bondish underground submarine bases. You know. Crazy stuff like that. But it all started actually in the atomic rocket program in the late 50s. And between Nellis Air Force Base, the atomic rocket program, because they didn't want to, you know, the Ruski or the Soviets to be spying on them and stuff. So they started drilling these tunnels, right? They drilled a tunnel from Nellis Air Force Base to where the atomic rocket program was. It was just part of their program. And that was the beginning of it, because my dad was a test pilot down at Nellis for a while there. And so he kind of, you know, he learned all that stuff. But as they were drilling that, they continued doing it because it was kind of, well, they got government money, so they kept doing that. And this is way before, of course, the oil shale project. That was the late 70s. That kind of covered the late 70s, mid 80s of the drilling project. But one of the things is they're drilling they're heading toward China Lake to hook up with some underground facilities there. And they're also heading all the way out to Vandenberg and other places. Vandenberg's right on the coast. It's where all the military launches its missiles, basically. So they're heading out that way, and they ran into this giant cavern out by Groom Lake, and that's where Area 51 actually came from, because it's